Yo guys, what's going on? I'm Tim Kelly, joined today by John Check. John, give the people your YouTube channel real quick.
Justin Verlander 35.
Yeah, make sure you guys go ahead and check that out. If you're watching this video, it means that I'm on one of my 2 vacations this summer. Vacation 1, I'm going to Rehoboth Beach in Delaware this week, and then in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be in Orlando, Florida, taking my talents to where Dwight Howard used to play for about a week or 10 days, whatever the case is. So you're going to be getting a lot of pre-recorded videos from me, not as much breaking news type videos, but I think they're videos that are going to interest people. I have some countdowns, some huge comparisons this week that people are going to be very interested in, and the biggest one, I think, the one that interests me the most, it probably won't be the one that gets the most views, but the one that interests me the most, and John I think would agree, is Barry Bonds versus Babe Ruth. I said it, and it's not even blasphemous when you look at the stats. It's not like statistically it's that far off if you go back and look through them, and people would think that off of name recognition. Now, obviously, Barry Bonds had the steroid thing. I don't think, John, it's not any secret that Barry Bonds did steroids, is it?
No, I mean, you look at his body and how it grew, and, you know, he was putting up numbers in his late 30s that Babe Ruth was putting up in his mid-20s and during his prime. So obviously he took some kind of performance-enhancing drug, but he also never was proven that he did take steroids either. Yeah,
and I don't think necessarily we need that proof. I think, like John said, the body type, everything, the ridiculous numbers, the fact that he had his prime from about age 34 to 38, that kind of gives you the indication. But nonetheless, I grew up watching Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa in the steroid era, and damn if Barry Bonds didn't have... If Barry Bonds is not the most technically perfect player that I've ever seen, especially at the plate, I don't know who is. The guy had one of the most amazing timing at the plate. His swing was absolutely incredible, and some of the shots that he put over into the bay were incredible. So we're going to do a comparison video here between him and Babe Ruth, and then at the end we're going to give you our guys' thoughts. Now, before I go through the exact numbers, I want to say that Barry Bonds, there's no stats for fielding. Barry Bonds, by all accounts, early in his career, from John and I going back and watching him, Barry Bonds was a very good fielder. He won 8 gold gloves in his career, and some of those late in his career. He won one in 2007. That's ridiculous. But some of those in the early 90s with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and then even the late 90s with the Giants, he was a tremendous fielder. Tremendous. And then you look at Babe Ruth. John, like you said, Babe Ruth sucked in the field.
Well, they had to put him somewhere because when they converted him from a pitcher, you know, he was too big to play the infield, so they had really no choice but to slap him out in the outfield and say, hey, just man the corner, and if you don't get it, oh well, you're going to hit a home run anyways. But, you know, Bonds, he also brought the element of speed, too, with his gold gloves, and, you know, he covered a lot of ground in the outfield along with his great bat. I mean, he was just an all-around more complete player when you look at the two as a whole.
Yeah, he was that, and I think at the plate, and again, we're going to get to those numbers in just a second. At the plate, Babe Ruth is probably better than Barry Bonds, but in the field, there's no comparison. And then you look at the stolen bases. In his career, and people forget how good of a base stealer Barry Bonds was in the 90s, 514 career stolen bases compared to Babe Ruth, who had 123 career stolen bases. Both played 22 seasons in their careers. So Barry Bonds, as John said, overall, I don't think that there is much of a comparison, but then you do bring in the fact that Babe Ruth was a pitcher. I don't know how to compare that, because when we're comparing Babe Ruth to Barry Bonds, we're talking about them at the plate and, in a sense, them in the field and what they did as an all-around player. Barry Bonds never pitched, so it's hard for me to compare what Babe Ruth did, but Babe Ruth was a stud pitcher too, so it's hard for me to just simply overlook that and leave it out, because it was an important part of Babe Ruth's career. So that's something that I would just take into account. Now, Babe Ruth was a 1936 electee to the Baseball Hall of Fame by the Baseball Writers of America. 95.1 percentage points got him in out of the 100. Barry Bonds, in his first year of eligibility, did not get on last year. I agreed with that. I don't want players with steroids in the Hall of Fame. At the same time, statistically, there's no question Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame. So, again, that's something you gotta look at. Babe Ruth only played in 2 All-Star games. I believe that is because they only had the All-Star games in 1933 and 34, which were the last 2 seasons of his career. Prior to that, I don't believe they had it, or Babe Ruth certainly would have been in the Hall of Fame. Now, if you look at some of the awards that they won, Babe Ruth won the 1916 pitching title, which shows you that he wasn't just an average pitcher. He was an elite pitcher. He won the 1923 AL MVP and the 1924 AL batting title. Barry Bonds, awards-wise, trumps him. The thing you have to remember is that they had way more awards. In 1990, Barry Bonds won the Major League Player of the Year. 1990, 92, and 93, he was the National League MVP. 2001, Major League Player of the Year, MVP. That was the year that he hit 73 home runs. He was also the Hank Aaron Award winner that year for the National League. In 2002, another MVP, another batting title. 2003, another MVP title. And 2004, still MLB Player of the Year. 2004, Hank Aaron Award winner, NL batting title, and another NL MVP. So in Barry Bonds, awards-wise, he trumps what Babe Ruth did. And then you look at what they did in the field. They didn't have Gold Gloves in the time of Babe Ruth, but Barry Bonds won Gold Gloves from 1990 to 98. And 98 is around the time when teammates said, John, that Barry Bonds began to bulk up, and while his hitting became off the charts then, his fielding certainly did suffer.
Yeah, because he got bigger and started swinging for more power. Because the most home runs Bonds ever had into a season, going into the 98 season, was only 46. And, he started bulking up, with the steroids and everything else. But I want to kind of touch on one thing about the steroids. Everyone is going to sit there and say that steroids made Bonds what it was. But if you look at Bonds' career numbers, you can take away every single season going up to 1998. Every single season, Bonds would finish his career with 411 homers, a 290 batting average. He'd have 445 stolen bases, 3 MVPs, and 8 Gold Gloves. So you're looking at almost a Hall of Fame career pre-steroids. And another thing about steroids is me and you, Tim, could each take steroids for a single year. Every single day, work out as much as Bonds did. And I guarantee you, we step up there against a Matt Harvey, a Verlander, or Kershaw. We're not going to do what Barry Bonds did.
No,
why? Because Bonds had the eye. Bonds never struck out much. He was so feared. I mean, he only walked 2,558 times. He had posted OBPs of over 600 in a season before. He had 3 straight seasons from 2001 to 2004 where he had an OBP of over 500.
It's incredible.
He was posting an OPS close to 1,400. It was just nuts. So you had to have the natural talent. So people want to discredit his stats because he took steroids. He had the natural talent to do everything else. I mean, this guy's eye was second.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, it was nearly impossible to strike this guy out. And what really perplexes me is that Bonds isn't the last person to win a Triple Crown. I mean, as many home runs as he was hitting, and how how high his battings were, his average. I mean, it's just nuts.
It's a product of the era that he played in. Had you not had Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa hitting all those home runs, Brady Anderson, other people hitting all those home runs in the late 90s, then Barry Bonds, I think, certainly would have won that. Now, you mentioned his eye. I think Barry Bonds said that he always looked for the label on the baseball, and how you do that when a ball is coming 90-some miles an hour is beyond me. And I would never be able, like John said, if we took steroids for an entire year, we wouldn't sniff 1 home run in the MLB, let alone sniff 73. The bottom line, though, is, in my mind, and I think maybe this is where I differ from a lot of people, I know Barry Bonds had a Hall of Fame career. I know he had a Hall of Fame career prior to steroids. And I enjoyed the hell out of watching this guy because he was a baseball genius. He was one of the greatest competitors that sports ever saw. But the bottom line is that it doesn't go to me, I don't hate Barry Bonds because he was an asshole, because from all accounts, Babe Ruth wasn't too far away from being that either. I hate Barry Bonds because as an athlete, I work my ass off, I work extremely hard, and I've never taken a shortcut once in my life. And Barry Bonds, with all the talent that he had, he was still one of the best players in the game, and he risked that, and it paid off for him in the short term, but I don't feel bad for him that he's discredited for what he did in his career. But, I mean, again, the numbers, he won 10 or 13 Silver Sluggers, I believe. His WAR was ridiculous, which is a stat that we don't have a ton for Babe Ruth. He won the batting title 6 times in his career. Up to 2004 was the last time that he won that. His on-base and slugging percentage off the charts. So, as I've had time to sit back, John, I think that the thing that we forget, that we don't recognize, is how good Barry Bonds was, and that goes along the lines of what you said. I understand the steroid thing. I don't want him in the Hall of Fame. I don't give him necessarily credit for what he did, but I think it's impossible for me as a baseball fan. You said he only hit 46 home runs. That would blow away what people are doing now. He did that naturally, and it's impossible for me to not have some sort of respect for what Barry Bonds did, even though a lot of it was done with the help of performance-enhancing drugs.
You know, there was a quote I heard about Barry Bonds. This one guy I was watching, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Ken Burns, baseball, his documentary.
Yeah.
There was a guy, he's a sports writer, I forget his name, I think his name is Howard Bryant. And he said a big reason why he thinks Barry Bonds started juicing is Barry Bonds, even when he was the NL's best player, even with the Pirates, people kind of always overlooked him because where he played. You know, he was a guy, stealing 30-30 guy, but guys were never really looking at him, and he was never fully in the spotlight. So he started taking steroids to start competing with the McGuires, the Sosas, the guys were getting all the most attention because he craved the spotlight. He wanted to be the center of attention. And I always thought that was so true because of Barry Bonds' personality. He was, until he started blasting, 73 that one year, he was still kind of always looked down under the McGuires and the Sosas, the guys that were hitting 65, 70. And I think I really agreed with that quote that he was, that was a big reason why he started taking steroids, because he wanted to be, trump those guys, what they did.
And I think in hindsight, it's wrong of us to have done that and not looked at what Barry Bonds did in the early 90s, because what he was doing blew away what Sammy Sosa was doing, regardless of the amount of home runs Sammy Sosa was hitting. It blew away what Mark McGwire was doing, because Mark McGwire played first base. He was hitting the ridiculous amount of home runs. He was not stealing bases. He was not fielding the way that Barry Bonds did, and we should have given Barry Bonds more credit. In a sense, we created the monster, but as Howard Bryant said, he's on ESPN now. He's one of the few people on ESPN that I really have a lot of respect for his work, because he goes in depth and talks about things like this. And Barry Bonds wanted to be not the best player in the game, not the best player of his era. Barry Bonds wanted to be the best player that ever lived. And statistically, I think, having gone through this, and again, we were vague on the stats. If you want to go look up the exact comparison between Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds, gladly go to Baseball Reference and do that. But I think that by bringing up enough of that, we made our point clear that, John, I think statistically, Barry Bonds might be the greatest player that ever lived, because while Babe Ruth hit for a 342 average and Barry Bonds hit 298, while Barry Bonds had about not too many less RBIs, about 150 less RBIs. Barry Bonds had more home runs, more runs scored, more hits in his career. He had more stolen bases and was a better overall fielder. I think Barry Bonds is probably the best player that we've ever seen in the history of the MLB. And it's not because I watched him in my era. It's not because I'm being one of those people that thinks just because I saw him that makes him the best player. The statistics don't lie, and the fact that he as an overall player was better than Babe Ruth, was better than Willie Mays, I think it tells a story for itself. Again, it's tainted, but that's my opinion.
And just the fact that Bonds was an all-around player with the speed and the glove and everything else, I think that's what would make him, I would choose him over Babe Ruth. But one thing we cannot forget to mention about Babe Ruth is Babe Ruth really saved baseball. because after the 1919 series with the Black Sox, baseball had a huge black eye on their face, and baseball was starting to lose popularity. And then Babe Ruth started hitting all these home runs at a rate we had never saw before. I forget who was the all-time home run leader before Babe Ruth broke his record, but his all-time home runs was like 127, and Ruth beat that in his first 4 years as an everyday hitter. You know, Ruth single-handedly brought people back to the game of baseball and started putting asses back in the seats. And he saved baseball, and he helped make it to what it was today, because, let's face it, if there was no Babe Ruth and led the whole onslaught of future hitters for him, that baseball would not be the game it was today. It might not even be, baseball today, because he single-handedly saved the game of baseball, and you cannot trump that. He is probably the face of baseball forever.
I don't think that there's any question that when you think of the greatest player of all time, if you don't know who Babe Ruth is, you should not be allowed to gain American citizenship if you don't know who Babe Ruth is, because he did save America's game in the sense that I know that the home run chase in '98, which was started by McGwire and Sosa, and then Bonds continued it through 2001 and through the early 2000s before everything came out with steroids. That kind of brought baseball back in the sense that after the strike, it was almost dying, but it was not at the bad level that it was after 1919 with the Black Sox, Shoeless Joe Jackson throwing the World Series. It was not in the state that it was where it truly needed to be saved after 1919. And it's not Barry Bonds' fault, the era that he came up in, but Babe Ruth truly did save the game, as John mentioned. So this video is not necessarily to discredit what Babe Ruth did. He's one of the top 5 players that's ever played the game. Hitting-wise, I think him and Ted Williams might be the greatest overall hitters that have ever played the game. And Babe Ruth may very well be the best overall power hitter that the game's ever seen in terms of consistency, because while Barry Bonds may have had that run through the late 90s, early 2000s, Babe Ruth was hitting 45 home runs his entire career, hitting RBIs at a rate. I mean, you talk about hitting 163 RBIs in 1931. That was unheard of back then. And for him to do that, I think it does demonstrate how good of a hitter he was.
He had 171 RBIs in 1921. And the scary part about it is Ruth, he was only 23 his first year he played almost full-time ball as a hitter. So imagine if I think he came into the league at 18 or 19. Imagine if he was getting at bats from then on. He'd probably have close to 800 homers.
Yeah, I mean, I think he might even have more than 800, because you look at, he played 1914. He pitched 5 games, so we'll take that year out because it really doesn't count. 1915, he pitched 42 games. 1916, he pitched 67. 1917, 52. 1918, he played in 95 games. So I believe that's when they made the transition. So you're talking about 3 years of this guy where he was getting some at-bats. He had, through 1918, like 15 career home runs. And I think at that point, that's when they realized that, damn, this guy can hit. But if you add in what he could have done there, if you add in 3 more, even 25 home run seasons or 35 home run seasons, it's ridiculous the amount of numbers that Babe Ruth could have put up. So that's our comparison. I think that John and I both side as an overall player with Barry Bonds, as a hitter with Babe Ruth, as again, the overall player goes to Barry Bonds, and I think it depends if you can look past the steroid thing. I don't think that anyone's saying that we're acting like Barry Bonds didn't do it, but look past it just for the sake of this comparison. Make sure you check out John, youtube.com/JustinVerlander35. Check out section215.com. Hit me up on Twitter at CashKelly_TRST, KASHKelly_TRST. John, what's your Twitter?
At John Check, CZECH.
Go check that out, and Facebook.com/TheRealSportsTalk. We will catch you guys next time. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching.